Thank you for joining us for the 210 Book Fairy reading of Empire of Storms. Nightfall. The bone drums had been pounding across the jagged slopes of the Black Mountains since sundown. From the rocky outcropping on which her war tent groaned against the dry wind, Princess Elena Galatinius had monitored the Dread Lord's army all afternoon as it washed across the mountains in ebony waves, and now that the sun had long since vanished, the enemy campfires flickered across the mountains and valley below like a blanket of stars. So many fires, so many, compared to the burning on her side of the valley. She did not need the gift of Fey ears to hear the prayers of her human army, both spoken and silent. She offered up several herself in the past few hours, though she knew they would go unanswered. Elena had never considered where she might die, never considered that it might be so far from the rocky green of Terrasen, that her body might not be burned, but devoured by the Dread Lord's beast. There would be no marker to tell where the Princess of Terrasen had fallen. There would be no marker for any of them. "You need rest," a rough, male voice said from the tent entrance behind her. Elena looked over her shoulder, her unbound silver hair snagging on the intricate leather scales of her armor. But Gavin's dark gaze was already on the two armies stretching below them, on the narrow backlands of demonication, too soon to be breached. For all his talk of rest, Gavin hadn't removed his own armor upon entering their tent hours before. Only minutes ago had his war leaders finally shoved out of the tent, bearing maps in their hands and not a shred of hope in their heart. She could scent it on them, the fear, the despair. Gavin's steps hardly crunched the dry, rocky earth as he approached her lonely vigil. Near silent, thanks to many years of roaming in the wilds of the south, Elena again faced those countless enemy fires. He said hoarsely, "Your father's forces could still make it." A fool's hope. Her immortal hearing had picked up every word of the hours of debate raging inside the tent behind them. "This valley is now a death trap," Elena said. She had led them all here. Gavin did not answer. "Come dawn," Elena went on, "it will be bathed in blood." The war leader at her side remained silent, so rare for Gavin. That silence, not a flicker of that untamed fierceness shone in his uptilled eyes, and his shaggy brown hair hung limp. She couldn't remember the last time either of them had bathed. Gavin turned to her with that frank assessment that had stripped her bare from the moment she'd first met him in her father's hall nearly a year ago, lifetimes ago. Such a different time, a different world, when the lands had still been full of singing and light, when magic hadn't begun to flicker into the glowing shadow of Erwan and his demon soldiers. She wondered how long Orianth could hold out once the slaughter here in the south had ended, wondered if Erwan would first destroy her father's shining palace atop the mountain, or if he would burn the royal library, burn the hearts and knowledge of an age, and then burn its people. "Dawn is yet hours away," said Gavin, his throat bobbing. "Time enough for you to make a run for it." "They'd tear us to shreds before we could clear the passes." "Not us, you." The firelight cast his tan face flickering relief. "You alone." "I will not abandon these people." Her fingers grazed his. "Or you." Gavin's face didn't stir. "There is no avoiding tomorrow, or the bloodshed. You overheard what the messenger said. I know you did. Aniel is a slaughterhouse. Our allies from the north are gone. Your father's army is too far behind. We will all die here. Die before the sun has fully risen." "We'll all die one day anyway." "No," Gavin squeezed her hand. "I will die. These people down there, they will die, either by sword or time. But you," his gaze flickered to her delicately pointed ears, the heritage of her father. "You could live for centuries, millennia. Do not throw it away on a doomed battle." "I would sooner die tomorrow than live 1,000 years with a coward's shame." But Gavin stared across the valley again at his people, the last line of defense against Erwan's horde. "Get behind your father's lines," he said roughly, "and continue the fight from there." She swallowed hard. It would be no use. Slowly, Gavin looked at her. And after all these months, all this time, she confessed, my father's power is failing. He is close, decades now, from failing. Mala's light dims inside him with every passing day. He could not stand against Erewhon and win. Her father's last words before she set out on this doomed quest months ago. My sun is setting, Elena. You must find a way to ensure yours still rises. Gavin's face leached of color. You choose now to tell me this? I choose now, Gavin, because there is no hope for me either. Whether I flee tonight or fight tomorrow, the continent will fall. Gavin shifted towards the dozen tents on the outcropping, his friends, her friends. None of us are walking away tomorrow, he said. And it was the way his words broke, the way his eyes shone, that had her reaching for his hand once more. Never, not once, in all their adventures, in all their horrors that they had endured together, had she seen him cry, Erewhon will win and rule this land and all others for eternity, Gavin whispered. Soldiers stirred in their camp below, men and women murmuring, swearing, weeping. Elena tracked the source of their terror all the way across the valley, one by one, as if a great hand of darkness swept them away. The fires of the dread lord's camp went out. The bone drums beat louder. He had arrived at last. Erewhon himself had come to oversee the final stand of Gavin's army. They were not going to wait until dawn, Gavin said, his hand lurching where Damaris was sheathed at his side. But Elena gripped his arm, the hard muscle like granite beneath his leather armor. Erewhon had come. Perhaps the gods were still listening. Perhaps her mother's fiery soul had convinced them. She took in Gavin's harsh, wild face, the face that she had come to cherish above all others, and she said, we are not going to win this battle. We are not going to win this war. His body quivered from some restraint to keep from going to his war leaders, but he gave her the respect of listening. They both had given each other that, had learned it the hard way. With her free hand, Elena lifted her fingers to the air between them. The raw magic of her veins now danced from flame and water to curling vine and crackling ice. Not an endless abyss like her father's, but a versatile, nimble gift of magic granted by her mother. We are not going to win this war, Elena repeated, Gavin's face aglow in the light of her uncut power, but we can delay it a little while. I can get across that valley in an hour or two. She curled her fingers into a fist and snuffed out her magic. Gavin's brows furrowed. What you speak of is madness, Elena, suicide. His lieutenants will catch you before you can even slip through the lines. Exactly. They'll bring me right to him. Now that he has come, they'll consider me a prized prisoner, not his assassin. No. An order and a plea. Kill Erewhon, and his beast will panic long enough for my father's forces to arrive, unite with whatever remains of ours, and crush the enemy legions. You say kill Erewhon as if it was some easy task. He is a valid king, Elena. Now, even if they were to bring you to him, he will leash you to his will before you can make a move. Her heart strained, but she forced the words out. That is why she couldn't stop her wobbling lips. That is why I need you to come with me instead of fight with your men. Gavin only stared at her. Because I need, tears slid down her cheeks. I need you as a distraction. I need you to buy me time to get past his inner defenses, just as the battle tomorrow would buy them time. Because Erewhon would go for Gavin first, the human warrior who had been a bastion against the Dark Lord's forces for so long, who had fought him when no one would. Erewhon's hatred for the human prince was rivaled only by his hatred for her father. Gavin studied her for a long moment, then reached to brush her tears away. He cannot be killed, Elena. You heard what your father's oracle whispered. She nodded. I know. And even if we manage to contain him, trap him, Gavin considered her words. You know we are only pushing the war onto someone else, to whoever one day rules these lands. This war, she said quietly, is but the second movement in a game that has been playing since those ancient days across the sea. We put it off for someone else to inherit if he's freed, and it will not save those soldiers down there from slaughter tomorrow. If we do not act, there won't be anyone to inherit the war, Elena said. Doubt danced in Gavin's eyes. Even now, she pushed. Our magic is failing. Our gods abandoning us, running from us. We have no Fae allies beyond those in my father's army, and their power, like his, is fading. But perhaps when the third movement comes, perhaps the players of our unfinished game will be different. Perhaps it will be a future in which Fae and human fight side by side, ripe with power. Maybe they will find a way to end this, so we will lose this battle, Gavin, she said. Our friends will die on the killing field come dawn, and we will use it as our distraction to contain Erewhon, so that Aurelia might have a future. His lips tightened, his sapphire eyes wide. No one must know, she said, her voice breaking. Even if we succeed, no one must know what we do. Doubt etched deep into his face. She gripped his hand harder. No one, Gavin. Agony rippled across his face, but he nodded. Hand in hand, they stared towards the darkness coating the mountains. The Dreadlord's bone drums, pounding like hammers on iron. Too soon those drums would be drowned out by the screams of dying soldiers. Too soon the valley fields would be carved with streams of blood. Gavin said, if we are to do this, we need to leave now. His attention again snagged by the nearby tent. No goodbyes, no last words. I'll give Holden the order to lead tomorrow. He'll know what to tell the others. She nodded, and it was confirmation enough. Gavin released her hand, striding towards the tent, closest to their own, to which his dearest friend and most loyal war leader was likely making the best of his final hours with his new wife. Elena drew her eyes away before Gavin's broad shoulders pushed through the heavy flaps. She gazed over the fires, across the valley to the darkness perched on the other side. She could have sworn it stared back. Sworn she heard the 1,000 whetstones as the Dreadlord's beasts sharpened their poison-slick claws. She lifted her eyes towards the smoke-stained skies, the plumes parting for a heartbeat to reveal a star-flecked night. The Lord of the North flickered down on her. Perhaps it was a final gift from Mala to these lands, in this age at least. Perhaps a thank you to Elena herself and a farewell. Because for Terrasen, for Aurelia, Elena would walk into eternal darkness lurking across the valley to buy them all a chance. Elena set up a final prayer on a pillar of smoke rising from the valley floor that the unborn, faraway sections of the night, heirs to a burden that would doom or save Aurelia, would forgive her for what she was about to do.